One of the most common complaints I've heard about Sunsama is that it is out of your budget. At $20 a month, it can be a little bit expensive if it's not a tool you use all the time. Since Sunsama has been one of my top affiliates for years, I set out to try to build a free alternative in Notion. And a few hours later, well, you'll see. First, let's talk about some of Sunsama's features that I was trying to replicate. The most basic being that you can add a task, and then you can put that onto your calendar at a specific time during the day. One of the features I use most in Sunsama is for time tracking. So I wanted to be able to create something that would allow me to track how much time I was spending on any task. I also wanted some of the simple functions like being able to tag a channel or some sort of category for where this task should live, as well as adding some subtasks and just notes to the task itself. These are all really basic functionality that I definitely felt confident in replicating. Some of the things that would be a little more complicated, but I knew I wanted to try, was the daily planning setup. This is where you have a list of all of the tasks that are due today, and you can easily move them onto your calendar. You can also import your tasks in from other automations and other connections to be able to move them into your task list or move them into your calendar as well. Now, I knew the automations was going to require some third-party tools, so I knew I would set up Zapier in the back of my mind, but that was going to be on the back burner. So for now, with this plan, I opened up Notion and I got started. The actual task management was really simple. You're creating a task and creating a calendar view where you can drive that task. 30 minutes in though, I started to get the time tracking working, and this is where I hit my first roadblock. Notion has a lot of buttons and automations and different functionality built into their system, but time tracking is not one of them. And trying to build something that was seamless and still worked nicely was a lot trickier than I expected. And then trying to connect my multiple databases to be able to handle things like objectives or monthly goals, trying to handle subtasks, it just started to get messy. Trying to show how much time I spent on any given task or in a given category was not really possible in the way that I had initially imagined it. Instead of trying to create an exact copy, I started to just create something that was at least functional. It wasn't quite as pretty as I had hoped, and it definitely wasn't an actual dupe for Notion. Sunsama has really simple start and stop functionality on their timers. Within the actual focus view, you can start on a task really easily. You can also switch to a Pomodoro style look, where you can set up breaks, choose how long you want the session to be, and cancel it as needed. Within my Notion dupe, starting time tracking was a little bit trickier than I expected. I started to use buttons, but you had to have the actual task open in order to easily stop the timer, because this lived in a different database. There was also no pretty way to give us a roll-up of how much time I've spent on this timer completely, and it can't count seconds, only minutes, which, while not a huge deal, can start to look a little messy if you track smaller sessions. The database was a little bit clunky and not very pretty, and even with that, being able to see the total roundup was not easy. I could see the total minutes and the total sessions that it took, but trying to get that to roll up in any sort of meaningful way into an analytics page was really tricky. I settled for 4 views: today, weekly, monthly, and yearly. Unlike Sunsama's breakdown, which has a much prettier look at the weekly totals, the daily breakdown, and your total months, and gave you a lot of other features like being able to see weekends or not, and being able to see each one broken down by actual tasks. Within Sunsama, you could also easily flip through your different weeks, where that wasn't really going to be possible to do in Notion, given their limited abilities to do roll-ups and relations between database into a chart. While it isn't pretty, like I said, Notion is functional, and you can see how you spend your time in a year, a month, or a week, but it's not exactly how I imagined it, and it's not as pretty as Sunsama's views. The other big problem I noticed right away came with time blocking. Time blocking into your calendar is one of the key functionalities of Sunsama that I felt really confident being able to replicate in Notion, but unfortunately it was not as easy as I had hoped. In Notion, you can only choose to show the calendar as a month or a week. There's no daily view with an hour-by-hour breakdown, and until Notion adds some kind of functionality to this, you're going to be forced to use a secondary app like Notion Calendar. Within Notion Calendar, you can take these database items and drag and drop them into your calendar to time block. So the functionality is there. It's just in a separate app, which if you are trying to consolidate your apps and trying to consolidate your tasks, it's a little bit counterintuitive. So again, there's a workaround, but is it a great one? Not in my opinion. The other thing I quickly realized was that my dashboard that I thought was pretty well laid out does not look good on mobile, meaning I'd have to create a whole separate mobile dashboard that looks a little bit nicer and is accessible from your phone so that you can actually use this within your mobile app. The biggest problem that I ran into was the automations. Well, I thought about using 𝗤𝗚r to just automate all my tasks coming in, which meant that anything that connects to 𝗤𝗚r can be pulled into Notion. I realized that a lot of the limitations of 𝗤𝗚r are hidden behind the paywall. So if you are just using the free version of 𝗤𝗚r, you can only get some basic data in there, and there's no way to have the two-way sync that Sunsama offers. For example, if you want to pull a task in from Asana, then if you check it off in Notion, it's not going to be marked done in Asana without some additional 𝗤𝗚r work. In Sunsama, Asana is a native integration, and it has the two-way sync automatically set up, along with some other functionality that allows you to choose what happens to that task when you do mark it off in Sunsama. That's all fine, but if you pay for a 𝗤𝗚r Pro subscription already, then maybe you are saving some money. If you don't, 𝗤𝗚r Pro starts at $30 a month, which instantly is not cheaper than Sunsama by itself. That was something that didn't even cross my mind when I first started to create this dupe. So here's what I learned in this process. I spent a lot of time trying to find workarounds for this, researching some alternative formulas I could use to do better time tracking, and in the end, I used certain widgets, like a Pomodoro widget, to just make that work in Notion, and eventually just kind of gave up on the Notion template altogether. If you want to download the Notion template that I attempted, you can, and you will see that there's a to-do list at the bottom of things that I never even got to, after hours of trying to just make this work. There are a lot of alternatives to Sunsama already out there, and some of them are free, some of them cost just as much. Sometimes paying a little bit more for an actual tool that's just working right out of the gate ends up saving you more time and money over the long haul. Over the last 3 years, Sunsama has saved me countless hours, switching from different platforms, trying to figure out what I need to do at the beginning of the day with various clients and various platforms, and it saves me so much time just realizing where my hours are actually going. When I have my daytime blocked out, I can actually do my Pomodoros and my time tracking directly within Sunsama, and I can connect Toggle to automatically invoice my clients at the end of the month. It just makes my life so much easier. If Sunsama is not the right fit for you, that is totally fine. I did try to create a dupe, and it is available for free in the description box. But if Sunsama seems like the tool that might actually be the answer for you, my affiliate code is down in the description box as well. Best of luck finding the tool that fits for you, and I'll see you in the next one.